I had a couple of questions we're going to deal with, but I'm going to weave them in as I go through the rest of the presentation. The video on this is not working too well, but by the way, a shortened version of this, as well as ones on fiduciary responsibility, building projects, planning, and a whole bunch of other are available on the Division of Library Development website as webinars. We've even got a group of short ones, like how to be a good board president, that's only 10 or 15 minutes. How to do a real simple strategic plan, that's 2 of them, they're like 15 minutes a piece. But if you can't sleep some night, and you've already read the handbook for trustees, you can go online and get your rest. Okay, the reason I do a whole workshop on legal basics too, but this is not that. And that's online as well. But it's important actually, Robin had mentioned, because she's a municipal library, that you need to understand that you're not all the same. You have all the same missions, the same goals, the same love of the library, but your legal structures are different. And that's one of the interesting things about not just New York, but let's just say the colonial states. It's a mess. You know, the square states, it's all county, 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 and they're all square, it's easy. But here it's not, because libraries were created by people like you. I'll give you one example. Freeport, for example, was created before there was a village of Freeport. So half the people think it's a village library. No, it's not. It predates the village. To start with, there's a basic understanding you need to come to grips with. The word library does not exist in the New York State Constitution. There is no requirement to have a library. There would be no libraries if people like you didn't decide it was a good thing to do for our country and our communities. So thank you again. But that lack of state constitutional provisions does provide certain challenges when it comes to capital finance for some libraries, and there are solutions and workarounds for that, but you do not have the right to pledge the faith and credit of your community to issue bonds. You get someone else to do it for you. You establish public libraries, but you should understand that the New York Public Library is a private library. The Great Neck Public Library is a private library. Roslyn is a private library. Now I say private not because of how they act, but what their legal structure is. And the legal structure is that they are basically a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation. It's called an association library. Now, ironically, we use the term 501c3, but most of these libraries were created before there was an IRS. So, but it's in. So the association library, and we have a couple of them here. Who's an association library? And which one? Oh, Great Neck, there you go. They are not governed by many of the public laws that the rest of you are. For example, they are not governed by general municipal law. They're not governed by public officers law, with 1 or 2 exceptions. They don't have civil service. I gotta mumble. But in best practices, they tend to follow them anyway. In other words, they don't give out the construction project to their brother-in-law. They do some bidding. But that's best practices. But they are not subject to general municipal law. The other thing is that their board members appoint themselves. They are technically a self-perpetuating board. The first association members technically actually own the place. And then they choose their successors. Now, that's not as simple as it sounds on the outside. If you're many libraries, you choose your friends and relatives and neighbors and whatnot. But the other extreme is to hold a public vote. And probably the most extreme example of that is Great Neck, which not just has a public vote, they basically do this proxy thing where people have 6 weeks to vote. It's no one, okay. But they have public votes on their trustees, right? That's it. They do that by policy. The board has the right to establish its own policies. Look at the policies later. So and you can change the policy. So many association libraries, and I'll give many examples, especially in Suffolk County, because we really push this, they choose to have a public election of trustees because they're going to the public for their budget too. It's called taxation without representation is tyranny. I think someone said that 250 years ago, 270 years ago. So that also fits in with what we call the public library district model, where people have representation on the library. That's the most prevalent kind of library in the state of New York. Half the libraries are association libraries. Many of them are small, but some of them are huge. The biggest ones are association libraries. Although New York and Queens and Brooklyn act public in most cases. Municipal library. Those of you who are a village or town or a county library, there's only villages, no town libraries here. And there's a couple. You've got Lynbrook, you've got Valley Stream, you got Phil and Mineola, etc. To me, that's the worst of all possible worlds, I'm being honest. That is not an legal opinion, it's just a personal opinion, because you are a stepchild of the municipality. The municipality decides how much money you get. And they appoint trustees. And they don't renew certain trustees. You're stuck. The mayor or the village board, whoever has the power, is the one that calls the shots. Now, this is unfortunate, because they are assuming and they are taking on the responsibility to make sure their library meets minimum standards and provides quality library service. In many parts of the state, that's a crisis now, especially since the tax cap came in, because they're taking money from the library in order to support things that are better for them. Maybe the police, maybe the garbage, maybe some make-do jobs, who knows? But it's very difficult for municipal libraries around the state. Very, very, very difficult. And they're powerless to prevent it. Indeed, one of my more popular jobs is going around helping those libraries get free of their villages or towns and becoming special districts or school district libraries. Since the Regents Commission back in 2000, which we developed, what's called the Public Library District Model, I think it's like 59 libraries in the state of New York have switched over, so that they have public elected trustees, publicly approved budget, and yeah, they have problems like civil service, but they think it's worth it. You know why? They're planning for the future. Their board members think they're responsible for the next 50 years, not for just tomorrow. School district public libraries, very popular on Long Island. It's almost a misnomer. They're school district public libraries. They're not run by the schools. And there's some conflict around here with a couple of you folks where the schools are sticking their nose where they don't belong. They conform to school district boundaries, but they have their own trustees, their own budget, and there are a series of laws in the state of New York, namely Ed Law 260 subdivision 7, 8, 9, and 10, which clearly define your independence from the school district. So if anyone has questions on that, I'm more than happy to deal with it. It is the most successful model because you're free to succeed or fail on your own. And you're elected. And yes, you have civil service. Whatever. Special districts, yes, sir.
To what extent is the school district bound to support the library?
Well, okay. Most of you don't have this problem anymore. The only thing you have to go to the school district for is if you want to float a bond to build a building. And they have to float it for you. They have to. It's required. The word says required in the law. If you want to be more specific, tell me what you had in mind.
Well, if you go to them and they succeed at getting a bond, who administers the dishing out of that bond money?
Okay, the bond is in their name. They probably, now you administer the library, you can administer basically the building project. The general way of doing it, best practice, because school districts can interfere, and they do, but generally they don't. You would approve, the architect would approve the bills, you'd approve the bills, you send it over to the school board, and they rubber stamp it. And either they pay the bills or you pay the bills. It goes all, in my experience, I did it both ways. One time I had all the money, and another time the school had it, but they just paid the bills automatically. And it's important then because you got another step, so the cash flow for these contractors gets a little mucky. But if they don't run the project, that's awkward, because that has to do with administering the project. And you're in charge of the administration of the library. That's all. You have a more specific, and are you doing a project now?
Contracts and they're managing the contract.
Okay. Is this Island? Okay. All right, I'm going to take time, just a quick moment here to talk about problems that you guys can run into. Historically, your library has acted subservient to the school board. You haven't, but I'm talking way back. That was unfortunate. You design the library, you decide if you need a library, the community votes, you have a library, the school board borrows the money on your behalf, and you build your library where you want to build it, looking like you want it to be. It's very clear in the law. We fought for that in the early 70s. I didn't fight for it, my colleagues fought for it. It's your choice. Now, if you've been letting them run the show all these years, you've got problems, and you have, and it's way before your time. This goes back 50 years in that library.
You got problems. Like
Yes, you do. You have a problem, and it depends on how much you want to fight.
What's the solution?
I mean, I've already recommended an illegal firm for you, but which is, by the way, the same legal firm that is running this pilot. Yes, it did. But you're not alone. There are other conflicts of school districts and libraries around. And the bottom line, if you don't fight for your library, who's going to fight for your library? Now I'm getting carried away here. This gentleman and that lady, and then we'll move on.
Can you repeat the laws?
Ed Law 260, subdivision 7, 8, 9, and 10. I memorized them. They're the Declaration of Independence for School District Public Libraries. They were passed by the state in the early 70s and 10. They were passed by the state in the early 70s. They were helped developed by a young man who was an aide to Leon Giuffrida, who was the chair of the Senate Education Committee. That young man is called Ken LaValle. He is just retiring now as the longest-serving senator in the state of New York. He has been a godsend for libraries. He's also the guy that got the dormitory authority legislation passed for me, because we had so many fights with school districts that didn't want to fund libraries. We decided to find another way to do it, so we could go like that to the school districts, which we do. And that dormitory authority legislation is now the basis for all your state aid for construction. So Ken has been a hero. But it went back to a couple of libraries that were fed up with their school districts, and they weren't going to take it anymore. Out east. The wild east. The lunatic fringe, as the state calls it. The next kind of library is a special district. There are some weird special districts floating around, like Shelter Rock. But most of the special districts, at least since I've been involved in the last 35 years, look like school district libraries. It's just the boundaries aren't school districts. But the legislations are typically the same, and they fall under Ed 260 subdivision, 260 and 226 or whatnot. There's a couple of odd ones, like Shelter Rock. They get their budget through the town, for example. But those are legacy special districts. All right? Yes, sir.
Have you ever had a library change their status from, let's say, school district to one of the other?
The only time that happened from a school district is Roosevelt changed a special district when their school district was going bankrupt, and they wanted to make sure that they were clean. But no, once you're a school district, you're in heaven. And frankly, you need a community vote to do it. Why would you do that? Why? I mean,
Well, you said an interesting thing about association library. There's no civil service.
yeah, I know, but you got to get people to vote for it. And they, not worth it. It's not worth it. There's too many protections, and frankly, so then your funding for association libraries, you'd still go through the school district. It's taking a step back. So anyway, if you want to pursue it, have fun. My hourly fee for a dumb move like that is a lot more than that.
Real quick,
Yeah.
the school district, does it have any responsibility to prevent the library from going belly up?
Well, how would you go belly up? They have the responsibility to give you your tax money in a timely fashion.
Well,
No, they don't. They have the responsibility, and Joe can correct me, but I know we won on this one, to provide you with your tax money, and if the taxes come in late, to provide you with sufficient funds to meet your payroll, in other words, your cash flow. That's what their responsibility is under Ed Law 259 Subdivision 1. But how would you go belly up?
Well, that's a strictly financial.
All right, that's getting too hypothetical. I don't know many libraries that are going belly up. And I had this lady last.
How many school districts, how many school district libraries are housed in school district buildings that pay rent?
Oh,
No.
maybe two. I know of one, and I'm talking to him. And just to get problematic on that, this is my personal opinion, but I think it's backed up by. The mistake was made here in the beginning by agreeing to pay rent. The school has a responsibility to provide you with facilities. There is a great opinion based in North Merrick on that very issue. And yet when you made a local deal to pay them, that's your problem. I know the state won't come in and try to fool around with that. You signed a document. Duh. All right, that's too much inside baseball. All right, but the point is there's different situations here. So if I'm going to say, when you're elected, the village libraries aren't elected. They're appointed by a mayor or village trustees who pick their friends. Okay, talk about effective board meetings. It's all about respect of the institution and the public and your time. I'm going to should on you. These are best practices. This is not the law. If you want to have an effective board meeting, the board needs to do diligence. They need to be prepared. And the only way they can be prepared is to have the stuff ahead of time. And I don't mean a day ahead of time. You got to get those board packets. If you're meeting on Monday, you better have them the Friday before. You need those board packets to read them. And some of your directors, boy, they give you big board packets. But they need to give them to you early enough so you can read them. And if you have questions, call the director before the meeting so you're not wasting everybody's time at the meeting. And you might actually have an answer at the meeting instead of the director going, I'll have to get back to you. I mean, that's just common sense. Don't sandbag the director at the meeting. Just, hey, I got a question about it. I don't understand why do we buy that for? Why do we owe that much money for such and such? Ask. That's your job. But if the director is getting that stuff to you the last minute, you can't do your job. You should get you tell your director, you can tell your director, we want the packets early. True, some of the bills might not be ready. You can make accommodation, we all do. Essential components of the agenda. It should be consistent, standard. It's nice if you have action items asterisked. And by the way, I was asked, well, do you have to go over the director's report or the children's librarian's report? Hell no. If you got it ahead of time, you simply say, are there any questions about the director's report? Okay, moving right along. Otherwise, you'll be there all night. Some of us like to talk, if you hadn't noticed. So it needs to be clear. I happen to believe in having periods of public expression in the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. That way, in the beginning of the meeting, if you wanted to thank the Boy Scout for building a new railing for you or whatnot, and they say a few words, they can go home. If somebody wants to come and bitch and moan, let them bitch and moan in the beginning. Go home. Don't sit there all night getting angry. If any of you have ever, I personally used to go to a lot of school board meetings, and they'd always call the meeting to order and then go into executive session for an hour. And by the time you got in there, you're so annoyed. Don't do that to these people. And then they make you wait all night. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and now I get a chance to talk? No. And then have it at the end if there's anything to bring up. Board president's role, I hope you use parliamentary procedure. Nobody's checking Robert's rules, but I mean some form of parliamentary procedure works. Keep your meetings formal. The grandchildren's photos are in the parking lot. Move it along, do essential items, and remember, the job there is to get things done. the board president has to be in charge. Now, I'll talk about, and I'll digress because this came up. I love trustees that have been trustees for a long time. I think it's a wonderful gift. I don't think it's a good practice for a trustee who's been a trustee for a long time to be the board president or anything else for a long, long time. You're a team there. It's nice to move people around. And I think it's important to have succession planning. I know boards that move through the chairs so that when a person is about to be reelected, they're the president. Then they get reelected, they start at the bottom again. You need fresh approach to it. That doesn't mean that everybody's good at being a board president, but everybody should understand what their roles are. There's a nice little 10-minute webinar that we have on the state for you to do that. But you need to be in charge of the meeting. But you're not the only one who has a role at the meeting. The director also is your teammate. The director isn't running the meeting, but the director is the primary resource for the meeting. You don't treat them like some peon. Really, I've been at board meetings where it's embarrassing. Like, wait a minute, you're paying this person the big bucks, you're the CEO, and they're not allowed to talk? They're a teammate. So find that happy spot in between them. Minutes. A good practice, if you can afford it, is to have someone else take the minutes. Because the secretary is a trustee, and the trustee should be paying attention instead of writing stuff down. Now, content of minutes. I'll jump ahead because this is under open meetings law. The minutes must reflect the actions taken by the board and how every board member voted. That's not an opinion, that's the law. They must reflect every action and how you voted. Now, if it's unanimous and you have the list of everybody at the top, okay, unanimous. If it's not unanimous, it's not 3-2. It's this one voted yes, this one voted no. Got it? That's the law. The minutes do not have to reflect every jibber-jabber report or anything like that. You can append them to your minutes if you want to keep a board packet for this. That would be good. But if you give people a raise, if you hire somebody, they need to be reflected in the minutes. If you pay the bills, that the amount of money needs to be reflected in the minutes. Very simple stuff. And there's great little explanations of this on the Committee on Open Government website, which I have in this presentation as well. But the minutes do not have to be 42 pages. And there's a common sense reason for that too. When you get carried away in the minutes, and some of you have seen this with school boards especially, the next month someone says, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. Because ironically, then the minutes don't become what happened, they become what you want to say happened. There's a little subtlety there, but it's true. So you want the facts, not the blah, 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 back and forth. You can have the backup materials for review, but minutes are minutes. Parliamentary procedures I mentioned. Don't get carried. Yes, sir.
How soon after the meeting?
2 weeks. Forget this thing about approved minutes. You just put unapproved. They're going to be posted on your website and available to the public. 2 weeks. You can fix them up next meeting and then make approved on it. But they need to be out in 2 weeks, unequivocally. The open meetings law, by the way, is, I will quote a person from the state, the second most violated law in the state of New York behind speeding. The open meetings law. All right, dealing with the public, I just said. Now, quickly, if you have it's a good idea for you to actually have a procedure and policy for public expression in the event something blows up and you have 30 people in the audience. Stuff happens, and it doesn't happen when you plan it to happen. It happens at the worst possible moment. Now, if something blows up and you have the 30 people, it is perfectly okay for you at the beginning of the meeting to adopt a policy that public expression shall be limited to 4 minutes. And everyone with something to say will be. That's fine. But you need a policy. And when dealing with the public and the controversy, and I'm not saying if you have a controversy, I'm going to say when you have a controversy. You as board members have to learn to keep your trap shut. You cannot start a discussion. because then your 4 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes get blown out the window. Dot, 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 dot. There's only 2 responses. Thank you. We'll refer to the director who will get back to you. That's it. And a director, if they're sitting next to you smart enough, should be kicking you in the ankle to just, that's it. It's so, but it's funny I can say this, it is so hard. Because people get up, they'll say falsehoods, they'll be nasty, and you just, speaking of which, that board meeting I talked about the Little League before, they actually, because their meetings were so raucous, they had a policy of the board regarding public expression and the need for decorum. And that personal insults and improper language was not tolerated, and the person shall be removed. And I watched them do it. And it's great. But that, the point is, you have to have a policy. You don't make it up as you go along. Yeah. Their security guard, who was a former, yeah. Hey, you're having 30, 40, 50 people at a meeting. Yes.
So, Terry, if you have a meeting and 30 people show up unexpected or there's comes up, then you can set the policy.
Right that minute, absolutely. You better, or it's going to be a night to remember. Been there, done that, trust me. All right. Okay, legal aspects. Open meetings law, I'm not going to go over this. You know what your meeting notices have to say. I told you the content. Executive sessions, again, this is you abuse the hell out of these things. Executive sessions are not to have private discussions. They're to have private discussions about topics that should not be discussed publicly. And that includes, if you're doing a real estate deal, if you're doing a contract, you negotiate a contract, if there's a health issue one of your staff members has and your director wants to explain it to you so they can get leave of absence. Those are the rules. Stick by them. That's why I hate school boards, because they have these executive sessions for an hour before the regular meeting. I can't help but think that maybe they're just planning what they're going to say in the regular meeting. It's all a setup. Sorry, getting carried away. The rights of the public. Contrary to popular belief, the public has only one right, and that is to observe you working. They are there to observe you. They're not there to participate. You can allow them to participate because that's a good and politically appropriate thing to do. It's their library, but you're not required. That said, allow a period of public expression at least once in the meeting or twice, but no more, or you'll be there till 2 o'clock in the morning. It becomes a show. So that's their rights. And it's ironic, I used this once when I had a troublesome person who was trying to prevent us from creating a library out in Suffolk. And she was really upset about the system. She was trying to put the system out of business. And I told her once, the Board of Regents has meetings, and maybe you should attend. I didn't tell her that the Board of Regents does not allow public expression, and indeed you have to sit in a completely different room, and there's a glass wall. But she missed the meeting we had to organize the library that night because she was up in Albany. Shucks. Voting. You need a quorum. A quorum is a majority of the board, even if you have vacancies. So if you have a 7-member board and there's only 6 appointed members, you still need 4. If you have a 5-member board and there's only 4 members, you still need 3. And not only that, and this now applies to association libraries as well, because we got SCD to come out with a legal opinion on this, you need a majority of the board, the whole board, vacancies and all, to approve any action. Now, that has been the law for public libraries for quite some time. Association libraries are always kind of fuzzy because Robert's Rules of Order doesn't call for that.
Right.
But Robert's Rules of Order is not the law of the state of New York. And the state education department has said enough already. Of course, it was bad practice because let's say you have an association library, let's say you're East Hampton, you've got 21 board members and 11 show up and it's 6 to 5. And then the next month, Another 11 show up, and they reverse it 6 to 5. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You need a majority of the entire board. So if you have 21 board members, 11 show up, it's got to be unanimous. So, post your minutes. Most of you don't. Thank you for the question about 2 weeks. You put them up on your, there's one great thing about America that you can rely on. People hate secrets, and if they don't know something, they make something up. They do. They do. I mean, there's a whole industry on this now, making stuff up. So the more you put on your website, the less questions you're going to get. Oh, we did a special district years ago where this was actually short, and it had to do with a nuclear power plant, where they wanted to merge with an unserved district next door that had been contracting with them. And I talked to the board president ahead of time, and he was brilliant. He gets up before this meeting, it's packed, and he says, I want to start the meeting by letting everyone here know that we have a fund balance of $3 million. And we have that because of the contracts we've gotten from Rocky Point. The reason you're all here, well, we're going to use that $3 million to make it a better library for you if we merge into a new district. That would be your money again. And I had all these angry people in the audience like, okay, now what do we do? He answered the question right away. They were there to say, where's our money? Tell them the truth. The truth will set you free. Oh, let me go back. Effective board meetings. If you don't have a full complement of board members and you're having trouble making a quorum, it's your own damn fault. New York State Law 226, I forget which subdivision, but I'm sure Joe could rattle it off, says that a board member, if they miss 3 meetings without excuse, has resigned. But you all give excuses. Dottie's in Florida. Dottie's in Florida. Dottie's in Florida. The only way I know around this, and it's really sloppy getting rid of board members, by the way. It's not fun. Some of the libraries that I have worked with in my own system adopted a board policy. And it says there shall be no excuses. The board can't excuse an absence. 3 meetings, you're out. It had a reinstatement process for example, if there was a real health issue and it was but 3 and you're out. It's tough. You got to get the board to vote for it. It's policy. It works. It works. Because if they can't make it, they can't make it. You need them. And like I said, the controversy is going to come at the worst time, when you just got a quorum, and then all of a sudden 35 people show up. So that's a way to do it, but I'm suggesting that you need to take responsibility for the attendance of all. Your team. If you acted like a team, someone would go kick that person in the butt. But you know what? To your neighbors. But you know, you're working for the library. If you get your board packet on time, and if it's in a way that you can read your financial reports, and many of you are not familiar with financial reports, so I'm going to start from scratch on that. If you look at a financial report and you don't understand it, your job is to sit down with your director and or business manager, both, and say, I don't understand this. Either teach me to understand it or make it so I can understand it. Got it? It's that simple. They need, people used to get mad at this. Our job as administrators is to dumb it down so everyone can understand it. Our job as educators is to make it understandable. If you don't understand it, every one of you should understand it, not just the financial wizard who happened to be a retired accountant. So you need to evaluate the financial reports and read them. Ask questions. That's what you're there. That's called doing diligence, which is another legal term. You need to approve all expenditures. I underline all expenditures. Now, you don't have to do them prior. You can make exceptions in your organization meeting that you will prepay or you'll do the payrolls afterwards. But at some point, you need to get a list of those bills, a warrant that says every single expenditure. You need to approve them. And the best practice there, we've statewide, we've pushed this thing that a trustee, public library trustee, cannot be a treasurer. That's against the law. So you need to be a trustee who is a finance officer. So you're not treasurer, but you still read the bills. Best example I had a trustee when I was a kid librarian in Freeport, the director, brilliant man. And he came on the board to make sure everything was right, perfect. Retired dean of the Brooklyn Law School. He spent so much time at board meetings that finally one of the other board members, who was head of pathology at Nassau County Medical Center, said, Ray, I respect what you're doing, but I have a Yankee game I want to get to. Come an hour early and go over the bills with Jerry. And if he can make you happy, if you make a motion for the bills, I'll second it. But I don't want to spend any more time here. It was like, Skylar, this is a great idea. Come in an hour early and go over the bills. It was terrific. Now, you might have more than one trustee do that. Or you might alternate it. If you got ordered by the state of New York, the state of New York thinks every single trustee should look at every single bill, every single month, which is nuts. But that's what they want. They compromise when you have a process where you have a couple of board members actually look at the warrants. And that's that box with all the bills that shows the requisitions and POs, blah, 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 blah. Look at it. Yes?
Just a little procedural question. So, if we have, let's say, 4 bills in a month, do we have to approve each one separately?
Yeah. Well, why are they different?
Well, they have different bills.
In other words, the whole bill warrant is a list of bills and we.
Correct. We have to.
Yeah, is the warrant got a separate number on it?
Yeah.
Well, do each one. And sign it. At least 2 trustees sign it. Yes?
But not, don't put those 2 together and approve them together.
No, I mean, it's just in the minutes. We approve all the warrants. Warrant number such and such, such and such, and such and such approved. You can do it in one motion. You just have to specify that that warrant was approved.
Right.
Because it was an action and it was a distinct item. And foilable.
Jerry?
Yes.
Excuse me, you just said 2 trustees sign it?
That's a good practice. Sure.
We have our treasurer and.
Okay, treasurer, that's fine. The treasurer's an independent person. They wanted to know if 2 trustees had to sign the warrants, but in their case, their treasurer signs a warrant and a trustee. So that's a good idea. You want segregation of duties, you want another. You need to maintain reserve funds. One of the questions I had was about fund balances. The state controller of New York, and unlike school districts, you don't have limits on your fund balances. But unlike school districts, you can't go get 85% of your next building project paid for by the state of New York. So the state controller has found repeatedly that it's okay for you to keep your money. Now, as they've been audited recently, they've actually brought some libraries to task because it's so much money, which is why I said if you have a plan for that money, and if you comply with Gatsby 56 or whatever it is, Government Accounting Standards Board, that you know what you're using it for. And you report it to the public. Don't hide it. People hate things that are hidden, but say why I have $3 million in the bank. Because we don't want to do a bond issue 2 years from now. We're going to need ... I hope you all have $3 million in the bank. A rule of thumb, and this is backed up, the controller actually found this okay too, but I got this from a lot of CPAs, and you should have a cash flow balance. In other words, what's called slush fund, extra money, not designated, of about 3 months at least, because you're not going to get your tax money in a timely fashion. If you do, good for you. Don't trust your schools. Now, you can get that tax money in a timely fashion for 25 years, and all of a sudden you get a new business manager, and all of a sudden October's coming around, and you're begging them for money. And then you'll win the fight, but meanwhile, you're having trouble making payroll. So if you have enough cash flow, that'll help you. Those of you that are in village libraries, by the way, if you have a fund balance, the village is not supposed to hold that against you, but they can. They could just reduce your budgets. So it's wise to have 3 to 6 months of a fund balance at least. And if you got more, you better have a plan for it. Because the people should be asking, why do you have so much money and you're asking for a tax increase? Now, I was asked a question before, well, how much should you spend all your money? I think it's smart to have a little bit left over just in case, and then you can roll it into the next year, but I'd roll it into a savings account, and I'll tell you why. If you don't go for an increase, and realize, if you're getting a public vote on your budget, not the village libraries, you don't have to vote on it every year. It's a continuing appropriation until changed by the next vote. But every time you don't vote that, you're losing money because everything costs a little bit more. Everything costs a little bit. Now, most of you are sticking under this tax cap. Good luck. Because I'm not sure what inflation they use, but not the inflation I see most of the libraries. But anyway, if you stick with that, then of course you're not really getting any real dollar increase. Now, historically, before there was a tax cap, before there was all, every time schools would go through these horrible, budget votes, losses time and time again, the libraries all cruised along up here, winning 99.97% of the budget votes in the state of New York, decade after decade after decade. You know why? You were never greedy. You're cheap anyway. You do 3%, 4%. School's going 7, 8. You're going, oh, no, we can't go 5. Even though inflation's 13. No, we can't do that. But every year, you got a yes. You got a yes. You got a yes. And you guys are now the best supported libraries in the United States of America. Because every year, you got a yes. You weren't greedy, but you were steady. The tortoise won. Don't go back on that habit. Just get what you can get, and if you really got a big project and you got to break the tax cap, break the tax cap. Actually, I know libraries all over the state have broken the tax cap, and none of them lost. None of them lost. Oh, the public relations. Nobody lost. Everybody else for the library. Oh, I'm going to go back to the legal thing. That special district will have their own law, but school district libraries, don't have to vote with the school district. They're allowed to vote anytime after April 1st, no April Fool's votes, and before June 30th in their own library building. The split law is very clear about that. That's subdivision 7. That one I have memorized. A lot of you guys vote with the schools. Fine, you save a few bucks. If the school's paying for it. We fought very hard for independence. I suggest you think about being separate. Yeah, it costs you a few dollars. Do a paper ballot. There's not that many people anyway. Just a thought. And I had another comment. Board membership, 3 meetings, fund balance. Okay, maybe that's it. We'll see. All right, you need to have investment policies. This is required. Not a choice. You should have them. Personnel actions. I use this throughout the trustee handbook. The director selects, the CEO selects, and the board appoints. You have to approve every personnel action. You have to. It's got to go in the minutes. No fooling around. What you should not be doing is deciding who to hire, except for the director. Now, there's variations on that theme. If I'm a director and I'm hiring a new librarian, I say, I've chosen this person because this is their background. And the board has every right to know that stuff. And if it's a new assistant director, maybe a little more than that. Say, okay, I've chosen Mike to be my assistant director. Here's his resume. If you'd like to meet him, I'm sure I could come in, but it's perfect for us. That's a courtesy. Now, what I can't tell you, though, is it's against the law for the board to micromanage hiring. I wish I could. But the board has the power to manage the library, and sometimes they stick their nose in there. That's not their job. It undercuts the authority of the director completely. And then people think they answer directly to the board. They don't. They answer to the library director. And from day one, you have undercut that. That's bad management, period, in any organization, not just libraries. So be careful about that. Yes?
You were mentioning about employees on the board and with the library system. You have treasurers and the clerks that work for the board. At what capacity do you?
Okay, that's great point. Thank you for bringing that. Now, the treasurer works for the trustees. You hire that because the treasurer is an officer of the corporation, just like the director is, just like the trustees, and as is the clerk. They work for the board. Thank you for making that distinction. Yeah, that's separate.
So we have.
Okay, no, you hired.
Who have been that
You hire them.
We have.
You want that, that's, yeah,
So
no,
that
no,
doesn't.
that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Yes,
So what happens, how do you hire when you don't have
you hire a director. Now, the state, even civil service will allow you to act in that capacity. You should have, part of your job is succession planning. Who's gonna take over as director, who's gonna be your acting director? And many of these libraries here have dealt with that on numerous occasions. So that's part of your responsibility. Right now, you have, as a board, you have a collective authority, a collective authority. Okay, so that's the way it is, but right now, you've gotta get yourself a director. And meanwhile, you have to make decisions and have somebody execute them for you. So you might get an acting director along the way. Depends on what's, if you're civil service, a little more complicated because they want some credentials. Yes?
So, okay, so you have a trustee board, and you have 5 people. And prior to 2 coming on board, you had 3 that had been in the seats for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And there's no director. They don't want the director, but the 2 newer people say that a director is needed. How do you work through that?
I actually have a quote from the Commissioner of Education in this book about that exact situation. Get yourself a director, or you're in danger of losing your charge. Don't fool around. What do you mean? If they want to run a library, go to library school, we'll find them a job. I've had trustees that do that. They're great.
I mean, we've seen it, I'm a roller, we've cleared up a lot of the nonsense that
Yes.
was in the past, so, but I know that there are libraries that are still struggling with, old methods, they like to control everything, even though that, that's not how a library should work, that there should be that bridge between the staff and the board.
Exactly.
And that should be the director.
Should be.
But when you have resistance on what policy or what in their head has worked for them, and then what's right.
Well, how well has it worked for them?
Well, whatever happens.
And I don't think it's fair to talk about that particular situation,
No, it's
but.
not me personally, I'm just hypothetically
Okay.
saying that how do you work through and have that?
The library is not your personal possession.
Right.
You didn't get elected to the library for power. And there's no money in it. Well, actually, in some cases, there has been, unfortunately. No, really, that's unfortunate. But no, there's no money in it. There's certainly no glory in it. And there should not be any jobs in it, like most political jobs. You're not on the board to hire your friends or do payback, unless you're the mayor of a village that wants to put somebody on the board, which is legal. But yes, sir.
Is an employee allowed to start working before they have board approval?
It happens all the time, and there's a little risk. But I've literally had a case where I've hired a page and fired a page before I got to a board meeting, so that the hiring and the firing was on the same personnel report. Yeah, it happens, and that's a risk the director takes. If I were a director, and I've been a director, depends on the level of responsibility you want, and if you think the board's going to do it. But on a lower level, it happens all the time. It's okay to do retroactive appointments, just like retroactive bills, as long as you do it. Now, the risk, of course, is the board does not approve it, in which case you got a problem, and it's a messy problem.
Can you hire in a limited capacity a former board member?
Can you?
Work for a library?
Are they qualified for the job?
How about like just a special contractor who does photo sessions?
Are they qualified for the job?
Yes.
Yes, you can. It looks lousy.
It looks lousy.
You're hiring your friends. And trustees are not allowed to get any compensation at all. We got rid of a trustee upstate, the state did, but I was involved in it, where the director quit, and the board president said, "I'll be the director," because it's a small library, so they need a library degree, but I only get paid $1. The second he took that dollar, boom, he was off the board. He broke the law.
That person is not.
I know, she's out. I got it. But I'm just letting you know you can't get compensation. Yes, Mike?
I was just gonna say, that also depends on your bylaws. We have something in the bylaws that says you can't make any money off the library for like 5 years or something.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Oh, I love it. Insofar as personnel is concerned, I also think that you have a responsibility to your community, to support your community, and to reflect your community. Many years ago, when I was the director of Suffolk Cooperative Library System, we were the busiest library system in the United States. Queens was number 2. And then a new director came in, Gary Strong, his name was. He's now at UCLA and he's retired. But Gary came in and looked at Queens. He said, this is the most diverse community in the world. And I look at our libraries, and we have this thing that in New York Public had a thing where you go and you choose, and Caroline might bring me up to date on this. They used to, when you first got hired, you either chose a library or you were assigned a library. And then you were there a year or two, and then you were put back to where you had to go. They shifted you around a lot. Gary said, but when somebody comes in the door, they don't look at people that look like them. So he asked his librarians, where do you want to be? So all of a sudden, in Flushing, he had a lot of Asian librarians and Asian clerks. And shortly thereafter, Brooklyn followed the same way. Brighton Beach was all Russian. And while he was doing that, he gave them citizenship classes, not just the community people, but his employees, clerks. And he had clerks coming in that had PhDs from another country, but they didn't have great English yet. That's something. Within 2 years, he blew us away in circulation because people came in, it was their library. And I suggest to you that look at your staff, look at yourselves. Do you reflect your community? I had this discussion with Southampton, the Rogers Memorial Library, out years ago. And the board looked around and they said, you're right, we screwed this up. And they're association library. So they went out and they recruited from the reservation, they recruited from the black community, they recruited from the Hispanic community, and all of a sudden that library was much more diverse, not just on the board as well as the staff. And their circulation just skyrocketed. And it became a very different feel. It became a library where, when they were criticized by the community for giving free English lessons but charging for Spanish, they said, because that's our mission, to make America a place for all citizens and to help people lead the American dream. That's what we think we're doing. You don't like it? Fine, don't vote for us. Oh, what a great board. Yes, sir.
And what do you do about civil service?
Well, you be persistent. I'm so tired of people blaming civil service. It's a rock in the stream you learn to go around. I'm serious. I know you guys are working diligently with civil service. I spent many decades of my career working with civil service. You do the best you can. That's what you do. Maybe on your board, though, you might take a look at your board and see if you can need to be more diverse and represent your community. There's ways. You can start by hiring your pages out of the kids in school. They reflect the community. And you're bringing people in there. And some of those pages, you never know what they grow up to be. I had a kid in Freeport, his name is Paul Webster. He was just a page, but we trusted him so much that we let him do some cleaning. And one Monday morning I came in and found out that he had snuck in on Saturday night with his girlfriend. So I called Paul and I said, I gotta fire you. I'm sorry. You didn't know that the alarm system tells me when you're tired. So I fired Paul. He goes home. His father calls me up, and I said, did he tell you what he did? He said, no. I said, hang up and then call me back. He calls me back. I said, I'm sorry. I'm glad you fired his ass. End of Paul. Until I'm up in this LOB, Legislative Office Building, in the cafeteria that's now a big McDonald's, before the Dormitory Authority bill is going to be heard before the Committee on Corporations in the Assembly. And I'm sitting there eating a sandwich, and this guy comes in, he says, Mr. Nichols. I go, Paul, how you doing? I'm doing great. By the way, I'm Chief Legal Counsel to the Committee on Corporations. We're discussing your bill today. I said, oh shit. He said, don't worry, I need you, that fire me was the best thing you ever did. It really helped me out, kind of, because he was a great kid. So, anyway, he actually ended up helping Albany become a school district public library. Because it had been an association library with a contract with the municipality. They became a school district, and they've done buildings ever since. Great. You never know. Avoid the appearance of nepotism. I've said this before. Appearance. Civil service. Obey the rules. Learn the rules so you can obey them. I still think, I hear that the workbook I wrote back in 1982 or something is still floating around about dealing with civil service. Come on, guys. Yes, they're annoying, but I understand you're working with them, trying to make new friends. You got a new activity going on. Civil service, there's 109 different civil service jurisdictions in the state of New York. They all have different rules, and they don't talk to each other. So it's tough. It's difficult. You got to work through the problem. But I believe the alternative is worse. I've come to believe that over many, 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 many years. And I'll tell you a quick story. Back in 1981, I was involved with the New York Library Association, and I actually got a bill written, the first bill I ever got written, by an attorney who was a specialist in civil service law, to get librarians into unclassified civil service. And I got it introduced. Of course, when the attorney called me up, he said, come out of the office. He says, here, it's in a brown paper envelope. I don't want your money. I don't want you written in a check. He says, we never had this conversation. Get out of here. I said, what happened? He said, I do work for CSCA, and they told me if I touched this with a 10-foot pole, I'd be out of work. I said, oh, your name will never be mentioned. So I'm not mentioning his name, though I'm sure he's passed now. I go back and I introduce this bill, get it introduced, and there's a hearing in the, again, legislative office building, the Harriman Hearing Hall. It's this big amphitheater, and the state commission is sitting up top, and I'm down in the pit, and you really feel like you're, in the pit. And the chair, who was a former city council president, says to me, all right, Mr. Nichols, thank you for your testimony. Can I ask you a personal question? I said, yeah, sure. She said, how old are you? I said, I'm 30. And she said, and you've talked to how difficult it is for people to have a career in civil service that's in their way. She said, but I see here you're the director of the Babylon Library. That's a very nice library. I've been out to Babylon. I said, yeah, I'm very fortunate. She said, so tell me how civil service has gotten in the way of your career. Butterfly pinned on the wall. You got to work the system, guys. Take every test. Get your people to take the test. Do the paperwork. It's annoying. I was a Suffolk County resident. I came back to be the director of Freeport. I did that knowing the law and the rules. The board president at the time said, Jerry, you want to come back? If you can find a way to get to Freeport, the board will hire you. There's a way to do it. There's a lot of rules, and you know who your best friend is? The Civil Service Department. They're not your enemy. Treat them as a friend. Ask for their help. They've always been helpful. And there's a couple of you here who had some very serious problems in your libraries regarding compliance with civil service. And the directors, that shall remain nameless, not all of them are still working anymore, took the advice that I gave them because they went to class. They called up the head of civil service, Carl Camp at the time, and said, we got a problem, and I was told that you'd help. And he did. So that works. That's the best you can do. But you know what? It's the law. Policies, real quick. You should be reviewing policies on a regular basis for a couple of reasons. First of all, ignorance is not bliss. The rule number one for library directors is don't let the board be surprised. And if you haven't looked at a policy in a while, you're going to be surprised. I can give you stories like crazy about a board. I had a trustee whose wife was a middle school principal and came home one day with this book that was kind of taken out of the library that one of the kids was caught reading in school, and it's filled. How can you have this in the library? So he says, I'll take care of it. And he goes to the next library board meeting. He says, we can't have this. The director said, don't you realize our material selection policy? This book is incredibly popular. It's, well, I don't care. I told my wife we're getting rid of it. Well, guess what? He wasn't a trustee much longer. He quit. But it was a surprise to him. That's not fair. So it's up to the director. And I'm not saying you rewrite policies. I'm saying you get familiarized with it. Not a bad practice to throw a policy a month at the board and saying, this is what our policy is. We've reviewed it. You know, maybe even not every month, but take a look at it. This is what our fines and fee structure is. This is how we close, stuff like that. They provide you legal protection, which is very important because some of you have actually had court cases where the judge looked at the policy and said, well, this policy is from 1981. That's 20 years ago. What's this? You haven't touched it since then? So, and again, policies are useless unless you and your patrons know about it. Put it on their website, especially meeting room policies. Okay, I'm closing up. I almost made 12. My whole comment, and this is to our friends in the corner there, it's about the library, not about you. And people, sometimes you get a bad actor on the board, and it's about them. It's about the library, and it's about quality service. It's not about the cheapest service. It's about the best service. And I got 2 more slides that I just like to close out on. And then last but not least, I got all kinds of resources. I know this will be available for you, but I'll leave that as the thing. Last questions. Oh, I guess they all want lunch. Yes? Well, why don't,
I can make a couple of quick announcements.
okay, here we go. Here,
Yeah.
let me turn this on. Turn it on.
That's exactly what we're going to do. So everyone who registered for the event will get an email with the PowerPoint and some of the other resources that were mentioned today. And please feel free to pass that along to the trustees that couldn't make it today. Let's start by giving Jerry a round of applause. I know Jerry is always willing to hear your questions, but I want you to know also that the Nassau Library System is also here for you. So if you have questions like the kinds that were raised today, you're always welcome to reach out to me. Just call Nassau Library System and ask for Caroline Ashby. I'm happy to help you. If I don't know the answer, we'll figure out the answer for you and get back to you and work with you. We're available to come to meet with you, to come to your board meetings. We want your boards to run as efficiently and as effectively as they can, and that's exactly what we're here for. Am I forgetting? We have CEUs for the event today. So those of you that would like CEUs, that is a credit for the time that you've spent with us today. In our ante room where you might have hung your coat, we have CEUs lined up by alphabetical order. And Gina with the cart here has the handbook for library trustees, and you're welcome to pick one up on your way out. Thank you. Thank you very much.